In 2024, there's a lot of optimism about the new 12-team expanded college football playoffs. And the main reason why so many college football fans are excited about this new playoff format is because it's going to create more parity in the sport. Now it's going to be a lot tougher for Alabama and Ohio State and Michigan to win it all consecutively every year. Do you really believe that? Let me tell you guys something really disturbing about the people who believe that expanding the playoffs to 12 teams is going to cause parity in college football. The top 12 teams right now, if we were to have a 12-team college football playoff this season, 7 out of 12 of those teams would be from either the Big Ten or the SEC. And that's not even including the new conference members such as Washington and Oregon who are joining the Big Ten, and Oklahoma and Texas who are going to be joining the SEC next year. Pretty much, if we had the 12-team college football playoffs for the 2023-2024 college football season, it pretty much would be the Big Ten SEC Invitational. You see, college football isn't going to be in a space where anybody can win it with the playoffs getting expanded. You see, with you expanding it to more teams, all you did was pretty much guarantee that half of the best teams in the Big Ten and half of the best teams in the SEC are going to be in this thing every year. The only thing that's keeping the SEC and the Big Ten in this thing every year is the fact that it was only 4 teams that could get in. Now you expand this thing to 12 teams, all of a sudden Alabama loses 2-3 games, they still get into the playoffs. Penn State, Ole Miss, they're pretty much locks to get in now. The only reason they couldn't get into the playoffs is because they couldn't get past Michigan or Ohio State, because it's only 4 teams. Like, I don't know why people thought that the best decision for creating parity in college football was by making it more easy access for the SEC and the Big Ten to get into it. What common sense did it make to expand it from 4 to 12? Now all of a sudden, half of the SEC is going to be in the conference. It's going to be a Big Ten SEC monopoly on college football. The majority of the most talented teams in college football are either in the Big Ten or the SEC. That's who's won the last couple of national championships outside of FSU and Clemson. And the ACC isn't really going to be a factor in this thing anytime soon. And neither is the Big 12. Like, they got a couple of teams that can get into this thing because they're going to have to auto bid. But as far as them being more parity in the sport and them being more competitive playoff games, there's not going to be more competitive playoff games. You mean to tell me that you think a G5 school that gets the auto bid is going to be able to compete with one of the teams that gets the at-large bid that barely gets in? What if you got a G5 school like Tulane that gets the auto bid and they got to face a 12 seed Oklahoma or Texas who has like 3 or 4 losses? How do you think that's going to go? Like, the semifinal matchups aren't going to be any closer with this 12-team college football playoff than what it already is now. Like, the only thing that's going to make this thing interesting is that we're going to have more games featuring more big-time programs, and that's why I'm excited about this. But the people that are making this seem like this is going to be such a massive help for college football, like, what are you truly thinking? Like, how is this going to help the sport? How is this creating parity? The best idea for creating parity is by making the already exclusive club of 4 teams even less exclusive by allowing more teams to get in. You don't just go to 6-8 teams. You just said, fuck it, we're going to 12 teams. Shit, we're going to have half of the best SC teams in this thing, and we're going to have half of the best Big Ten teams in this thing. Like, just right off the rip. Next year, I'm going to tell you who are going to be locks to get into this thing. From the Big Ten, it's going to be Ohio State. I don't know about Michigan because I don't know what's going to happen to Jim Harbaugh, but you're going to have Ohio State, Penn State, either Washington or Oregon. So you're going to at least have 3 or 4 Big Ten teams that get in. And you're going to have, like 4 or 5 SEC teams that get in. You know Bama's going to get in. You know Georgia's going to get in. Ole Miss is definitely going to get in with how the hell they've been recruiting the last couple of weeks. Holy Christ. Did you know they just got Walter Nolan? Look out for them. You're going to have Ole Miss that's going to be in. And there's always one team from the SEC East that always seems to come out of nowhere. It could be Tennessee. It could be Florida. Who knows? It could be Mizzou again. Like, the top 12 teams right now in college football Michigan, Washington, Texas, Bama, FSU, UGA, Ohio State, Oregon, Mizzou, Penn State, Ole Miss, Oklahoma, they recruit at a high level. From a talent standpoint, they're always going to be there. It just comes down to coaching and execution. And the only thing that kept the SEC and the Big Ten from dominating this thing in the past has been the fact that you can only put 4 teams in. Think about all the times that Alabama has got left out the playoffs when people felt they deserved to be in. There's a time when Georgia got left out of the playoffs when people felt they should have been in. Same thing with Ohio State. You want to know why? Because the fact that you can only have 4 teams in this thing keeps this monopoly around college football from happening. People already believe that there's a monopoly in the sport. And that is true to a certain extent. But in this year of the college football playoffs, the last year of the 14 playoffs, this is probably the first year ever that we got different conferences in this thing. We don't have 2 teams for one conference. We got 1 team from the best conference representing every conference in college football outside of the ACC. Apologies to the Florida State fans out there. But imagine how this thing is going to look next year when you make it easy for Georgia to get in. And when FSU and Georgia got left out of this thing, they said, that's exactly why we need a 12-team playoff. Yeah, you only want to expand the playoffs so your team can get in. But if you're trying to make this thing seem like this is going to be better for the sport, it's going to be better for the sport, but it's also going to hurt the sport because all this is going to do is make the SEC and the Big Ten stronger than what they already are now. They're going to have even more pull on this thing. Like, be honest, the SEC and Big Ten know how this thing is going to play out. And I have a strong feeling that there's going to be some modifications to this thing because the SEC and the Big Ten, they're going to have way too easy of a time running through these G5 schools. Like, the whole argument for the playoffs getting expanded has changed so many times. It went from, well, the G5 schools don't have a chance. Cincinnati got in 2020. Well, we don't have a lot of parity. We don't have a lot of new faces. Well, this year you got Washington and Texas who never appeared. Well, Washington went one time, and you got Texas who was making their first ever appearance, and you got Bama and Michigan. We've never gotten these matchups before. By going to 12 teams, all you're doing is making it a guarantee that this thing is going to be the Big Ten SEC Invitational every single year. The only thing that's keeping these 2 conferences from dominating the sport has been the fact that only 4 teams can get in. And even then, you still have had a hard time holding down the Big Ten and the SEC. And your whole solution for creating parity in college football is just by making it even more easier for the SEC and Big Ten to not get left out. That doesn't make a lot of sense to me, but if you call that parity, I'm all for it, I guess. I'm excited about the 12-team college football playoffs, but all this is going to do is further create the monopoly that already has been building the last decade between the Big Ten and the SEC on college football. You saw how Texas and Oklahoma joining the SEC completely kickstarted conference realignment and has completely changed the landscape of college football forever. If the SEC's moves have this much pull on the rest of the sport, imagine how them and the Big Ten always making it into the playoffs is going to impact the future of this sport. Now they can say there's not even a need for us even to compete in this thing with these other teams. They're not going to be able to beat us. We might as well just go ahead and do our own thing. So I'm excited about the 12-team college football playoffs, but I don't have this optimism that many people have that it's going to bring among parity in the sport, where the parity has kind of been created because you can only allow 4 teams in. Creating parity is not making it easier for Georgia with 3-4 losses to get in. Like, people only want to expand this thing when their team gets left out. Shit, there's going to be teams that get left out of the 12-team college football playoffs, and people are going to say, man, we need to go to 16. And then we go to 16. Man, we need to go to 24. And then there's people that's going to say, man, we need to go to 32. And then there's going to be people that just say, F it, we need to take Mike Leach advice. 64-team college football playoffs, 8-game regular season. Let's let them slug it out for who is the national champion.